When Aunt Valerie swept into the lawyer's office, she didn't even pretend to hide her smugness. She wore a velvet blazer, oversized sunglasses, and enough perfume to alert the building 3 floors up that she had arrived. She tossed her bag onto the conference table, draped her scarf over the back of a leather chair, and said loudly, without even looking around, "This won't take long." As if Grandpa's entire legacy was merely a formality on her path to inevitable riches. As if the rest of us were side characters in her inheritance fairy tale. I sat in the back corner of the room, fingers knotted together so tightly they ached. My heart still wasn't finished grieving. Grandpa had only passed 3 weeks earlier, and the ache of his absence still reached deep into my chest. I would have skipped this whole gathering if the lawyer hadn't insisted that all named parties needed to be present. Named parties. The phrase haunted me. Because why would I be a named party? I was just his granddaughter, the quiet one, the helper, the weekend visitor who sat on the porch with him eating blueberry muffins and listening to him talk about life and regrets and stories he never told anyone else. Aunt Valerie, on the other hand, was his only surviving child. She believed the will was hers before it was even opened. She believed she had earned it by proximity, by status, by age. She believed every dollar in his accounts, every inch of his property, and every antique in his attic already belonged to her by divine right. But life does funny things when people make assumptions. When the lawyer, Mr. Bennett, cleared his throat and opened the envelope, the entire room grew still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. He adjusted his glasses, glanced around the table, and then began. "To my granddaughter, Claire." Aunt Valerie jerked so violently that her chair scraped across the floor. "What?" she snapped, as if her name had been mispronounced rather than skipped entirely. But the lawyer didn't stop. I think everyone in that room stopped breathing, though, to hear my name first. To hear Grandpa's voice through the lawyer's reading. To know he had thought of me before anyone else. It sent a sharp, stunning jolt through my chest, equal parts shock and grief and something I couldn't even name yet. My aunt glared at me, eyes narrowed into sharp, poisonous slits, as if I had personally rewritten the will that morning. I didn't look back at her. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Because in that moment, I knew something life-altering was coming. Something Grandpa never told me. Something my aunt never wanted me to know. Something that would change everything about our family, our history, and the lies we'd been raised to believe. This wasn't just a will reading. This was a reckoning. I should tell you the truth from the beginning. My aunt never liked me. Not even when I was a child. She said it was because I was too sensitive, or because I asked too many questions, or because I reminded her too much of my father, but none of those explanations ever really made sense. My father died in a car accident when I was 7, and talking about him was always treated like stepping on broken glass. Every conversation cut someone, but no one ever acknowledged the bleeding. Grandpa was the only one who kept my dad's memory alive. He told me stories about how my father used to whistle while fixing engines in the garage, or how he cried the day I was born because he thought he'd never seen anything so perfect. Grandpa would always add, "He loved you more than he loved his own life," and his voice would crack just slightly. But Aunt Valerie? She shut down any mention of him. She changed the subject. She redirected the conversation to herself, always to herself. It wasn't until I got older that I realized she didn't hate me for who I was. She hated me for who he was. And for what his memory threatened inside her. But back then, I just thought she was cold. I never imagined she was hiding something far worse. The morning of the will reading had felt strange from the moment I woke up. The sky was gray, restless, the kind of sky Grandpa used to say warned you to walk slowly and listen carefully. I'd always laughed when he said things like that. I didn't laugh now. The lawyer's office was sleek, polished marble floors, glass walls, leather chairs. It all felt too formal, too sterile, too sharp for a day so wrapped up in grief and decades of quiet tension. Family members trickled in, offering me hugs that were either too tight or too quick. A few whispered condolences. A few whispered gossip. A few whispered predictions about Valerie walking out of the building a millionaire. Of course she will, someone murmured behind me. She's the only child. Who else would he leave things to? The girl, maybe, another said softly. He adored Claire. Adored, sure. But he wasn't stupid. Valerie was the caretaker. Caretaker? I swallowed hard. That wasn't the word Grandpa ever used for her. He used words like present, opinionated, controlling, but never caring. She only became involved in his final years after she discovered that Grandpa's estate was larger than anyone realized. And that was when everything changed. When the will reading officially began, Aunt Valerie positioned herself at the head of the table, the exact seat the lawyer usually used. She crossed her arms and said, "Let's make this quick. I have a showing at 5 and dinner reservations at 6. A showing, meaning she was selling something. Possibly something she assumed would become hers once this will was finalized. She smiled at the lawyer like a woman about to receive a prize. She smiled at me like someone about to snatch candy from a child. And then the lawyer read my name first. Everything shattered. Mr. Bennet continued reading while my aunt sputtered like a boiling kettle. To my granddaughter Claire, I leave the contents of my safe deposit box, including all personal records, letters, and family documents. My heartbeat hammered. Safe deposit box? Family documents? Letters? My aunt slammed her hand on the table. Absolutely not. Stop the reading. The lawyer didn't even flinch. And I grant her full authority to manage, publish, or withhold the information as she sees fit. Publish. What information could possibly need publishing? A chill crept up my spine. My aunt stood up. No. This is insanity. That girl doesn't understand the weight of these decisions. My father must have been confused. Ms. Dalton, the lawyer interrupted curtly, please sit. She did not sit. But she did stop speaking when he turned the next page. Because the next part was hers. To my daughter, Valerie. The room held its breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for. I leave responsibility for all outstanding medical expenses and any remaining debts related to my care. A stunned silence filled the air. Valerie blinked, her lips parting soundlessly. Excuse me, she whispered. The lawyer kept reading. And I hope that the weight of these responsibilities will remind you that caregiving goes beyond physical presence. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled. Her breath became sharp and uneven. People shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Some stared at her openly. Some gasped. But Grandpa's words weren't cruel. They were measured. Intentional. Spoken like a man who had carried disappointment for decades. I felt guilt surge inside me. Guilt that wasn't mine to claim. I never wanted her to be humiliated. Not like this. Not in front of everyone. But Grandpa had known exactly what he was doing. He hadn't written these words in anger. He had written them in truth. And truth, once spoken, cannot be unspoken. And finally, the lawyer continued, the remainder of my estate. Aunt Valerie jerked upright again, desperate, clutching at the last bit of hope. Including all liquid assets, investment properties, vehicles, and the lakeside cabin. She exhaled in relief. Thank God, her expression seemed to say, shall pass to the rightful heir as defined by the accompanying letter. More murmurs. Someone whispered, what letter? Another whispered, what heir? The lawyer opened the attached envelope, sealed with red wax. Aunt Valerie leaned across the table. This better be good. He read. My true heir is the one who has shown kindness without expectation, loyalty without reward, and love without condition. My breath caught. Claire carries the spirit of her father, my son, whose sacrifice has been erased by lies. My aunt stiffened violently. His story has been hidden for too long. My throat tightened painfully. And so I leave the remainder of my estate to Claire. He said it simply, plainly, without drama. But the room reacted with all the drama my aunt normally reserved for herself. People gasped. Someone dropped a pen. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else said, "He left her everything?" My aunt screamed, "This is fraud. I demand a revision." She lunged forward, grabbing the will from the lawyer's hands. Her nails tore the corner of the page. Her hair fell from its careful style. Her face twisted into something almost unrecognizable. She shoved the papers toward me. "You think you deserve this? You think you earned anything? You're just a girl who visited on weekends." I flinched. Not because of her words, but because I suddenly, painfully realized. She truly believed everything Grandpa owned was hers. By right. By blood. By entitlement. She truly believed I was nothing. But Grandpa? He didn't agree. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood. He had seen the truth of her long before I did. That's when the lawyer quietly tapped the table and said, "There is a video message." The room went silent. Even Valerie froze. Mr. Bennet pressed play. Grandpa appeared on the screen, pale but resolute. And then he said the words that would unravel everything. "Valerie, if you're watching this, then my will is being read, and I imagine you are outraged." A few people chuckled nervously. "You believed my love was measured in inheritance. It wasn't." Her fists clenched. "You believed your proximity to me meant you understood me. You didn't." She trembled. "You believed Claire was naive. She isn't." Tears stung my eyes. And then the line that pierced the entire room. "You lied to Claire about her father." My breath stopped. The video ended. And the lawyer slowly reached forward and paused the screen. No one spoke. Not a word. Because we all knew. That sentence was only the beginning. No one moved. No one breathed. The final line of Grandpa's video message hung in the air like smoke. "You lied to Claire about her father." The lawyer paused the footage, but the silence was already deafening. My aunt stood frozen, her face drained of all color. For the first time in my entire life, she didn't have words. And honestly, that scared me more than her screaming ever could. Someone near the window whispered, "What did she lie about?" Another whispered, "What happened to Claire's father?" But I already knew, deep in my bones, that whatever the truth was, it wasn't going to be gentle. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to steady my breathing. My heart felt too big, too loud, too fragile inside my ribs. Finally, Aunt Valerie spoke. "Turn it back on," she snapped, voice trembling. "There must be more." He must have been confused. But Mr. Bennet shook his head. That was the full video. She turned on me then, slowly, like a predator who had just lost the scent of its prey and suddenly rediscovered it. "This is your doing," she hissed. "You poisoned him against me. You filled his head with nonsense." I stared at her, stunned. "Valerie, I didn't even know he changed his will." "Liar!" she shrieked. The outburst echoed off the glass walls. People flinched. Even her husband took a step back. Then she pointed at the sealed document the lawyer still held. "What's in that letter? Read it. Read it now." Her voice cracked. The lawyer exhaled slowly, opened the second page, Grandpa's final written instructions, and began reading aloud. "My dear family, there is one truth that must be spoken before my estate is settled." I held my breath. "My son, Claire's father, did not die in a car accident the way you have been told." My vision blurred. My heartbeat roared. I felt the world tilt beneath me. My son was not reckless. He was not irresponsible. He did not leave Claire behind by choice. I gripped the table as my hands numbed. The accident was not an accident. A gasp filled the room like a sharp exhale of wind. My son died while protecting this family from consequences created long before Claire was born. Aunt Valerie's knees buckled. She steadied herself on the back of a chair, shaking violently. "No," she whispered. "No, he's lying. He's confused. He didn't mean that." But the lawyer kept reading. My daughter Valerie feared that the truth would harm her reputation, so she changed the story. My breath caught in my throat. She told Claire that her father was irresponsible. She told others he abandoned his responsibilities. But none of this was true. A wave of pain crashed over me. My aunt had told me, that my father was careless, that he drank too much, that he wasn't stable enough for a family, that he caused his own death because of poor decisions. I had spent my childhood carrying the invisible shame of her words. But now I understood what Grandpa meant. My son was a good man, the letter continued softly. A good father. A good soul. Tears spilled from my eyes. He risked everything for Claire. And he paid with his life. By the time the lawyer finished reading, the room was silent. Except for Valerie. Her breathing had become ragged, shallow, panicked. She looked around the room as if searching for someone to save her. But no one moved. Not one person. Even her husband stared at her with shock and something close to horror. "This is wrong," she screamed. "I never lied. I protected this family. She stopped abruptly, choking on her own words. Her eyes darted back and forth, frantic, cornered. "You!" she suddenly shouted at me. "You think this is some fairy tale moment? That you're the chosen one? You're nothing but a spoiled." "Valerie." The lawyer's voice cut sharply. "That's enough." But she kept spiraling. "You think Harold loved you most," she shrieked. "He pitied you, Claire. Pitied you." I felt something inside me shift. Not anger, but exhaustion. Deep, bone-deep exhaustion from years of absorbing her bitterness. "Valerie," I said quietly, "please stop." She stared at me, panting like she'd just run a marathon through rage and denial. "You took everything from me," she whispered. "Everything I deserved." But those words finally pulled me to my feet. "I didn't take anything," I said, voice steady. "Grandpa gave it. And he didn't give it to punish you. He gave it to tell the truth you wouldn't." My aunt shook her head violently, almost like she was trying to shake off reality. "No, no, no." Then she grabbed her purse and stormed out of the room sobbing, angry, humiliated, undone. The door slammed so hard the walls rattled. And just like that, her grip on the family was broken. A week later, I met the lawyer at the bank to open the safe deposit box Grandpa had left me. My fingers trembled as I slid the key into the lock. Inside were neatly organized envelopes, old journals, photographs, cassette tapes, and a USB drive. On top was a letter addressed to me in Grandpa's handwriting. I sat down in the small private room and opened it. "Claire, the story you were told was not the story that happened." My chest tightened painfully. "Your father worked for someone dangerous. Someone who threatened him, and by extension, you. He tried to leave. He tried to protect you both." The words blurred through my tears. "He died preventing someone from harming you." I covered my mouth with my hand, trying to breathe. My daughter Valerie blamed him. Blamed his choices. Blamed fate. She shaped the narrative so she wouldn't have to confront the truth, that she was partly responsible for putting him in harm's way. I felt a cold shiver run through me. What she did after his death, the lies she told you, were wrong. I am sorry you grew up believing your father was less than he was. I clutched the letter to my chest and sobbed silently. A grief I didn't know I'd been carrying finally loosened its grip. Over the next several weeks, I poured through the contents of the box. I read letters exchanged between my dad and Grandpa. I listened to tapes of my father singing to me when I was a baby. I saw medical reports and police files that validated everything Grandpa had said. Piece by piece, the broken story of my father's life began to heal. Piece by piece, The shame planted by my aunt transformed into pride. Piece by piece, I reclaimed a man I never got to grow up with. I learned he had been brave, thoughtful, in love with me beyond measure. I learned he had sacrificed everything to keep me safe. I learned that I had never been abandoned. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Meanwhile, Valerie spiraled. She tried to contest the will, and failed. She tried to manipulate relatives, and they distanced themselves. She tried to claim Grandpa wasn't mentally competent, but the video recording and updated medical evaluations shattered her argument. And worst of all for her, people now knew the truth. About her lies. About her bitterness. About how she tried to rewrite my father's story. Her reputation crumbled. Not because of revenge, but because truth has a weight nothing can compete with. 1 month later, I visited the lakeside cabin Grandpa left me. When I unlocked the door, the scent of cedar and old books wrapped around me like a hug. The same armchair where Grandpa used to sit creaked softly when I touched it. I walked to the small wooden dock outside and sat at the edge, letting the cool lake breeze brush against my face. For the first time in years, the water felt peaceful instead of lonely. I pulled out one of my father's letters, the one he wrote before my birth. My Claire, if you're reading this, you have grown into a woman I never had the privilege to meet. But I want you to know, I loved you before you took your first breath. And I am with you even now. The tears came again, but this time, they weren't heavy. They were releasing me. I've thought a lot about Grandpa's final decisions. He didn't write that will to punish Valerie. He wrote it to protect me, to correct the story, to restore the truth, to give me strength that had been taken away by lies. And he wrote it to remind everyone, including me, that inheritance isn't just about money. It's about legacy, integrity, truth. I used to think I was invisible in my family, but Grandpa saw me the whole time. He trusted me with the truth. He trusted me with our legacy. He trusted me to break the cycle of bitterness and fear. And in doing so, he gave me something priceless. A father restored. A future reclaimed. And a past rewritten with love. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.